Somebody else did. Don't think I don't read stuff. Hey.
You picked it? You nailed it?
You picked it. Oh, you didn't pick it.
Got wrong
You didn't do
info.
your homework either then.
Mark, we good? Okay. All right. Hey, good night. Excited to add Walter Nolen from Ole Miss. Guy we did a lot of work on, scouts through the fall, and then Senior Bowl, and through the Combine, and then brought Walt in here for a 30 visit. Impressed us the whole way. The tape spoke for itself. Violent, disruptive, high motor, tenacious, three-down player. Hard to find those guys that can affect the pocket from the interior of the formation. So really excited to add Walt, and excited to get him in here tomorrow and get him to meet some of our players and meet the team. So with that, open it up to you guys.
He was mentioning the fact that he appreciated the fact that you guys went to the source, is what he said, to kind of listen to him about whatever negative might be out there about him. What, in general, were those conversations good on your end as much as they were for him? Because he seemed like he was really appreciative of that.
Yeah, he's got a huge heart. It was awesome in the pre-draft process, getting to know him. And I don't know what narratives are out there or anything like that. I make up my own mind. And this guy's a Cardinal, 1,000%. So I'm glad we got to add him.
Why is he a Cardinal 1,000%?
Turn on the tape.
You guys have a lot of vets in that room who can help him along on and off the field. Where can he benefit the most from those guys?
Well, I think, anytime, whether it's in that room or, I think that's why we put a big priority on the type of people on this team. And so, JG and his staff do a great job of laying out expectations and how we do things, but the firsthand knowledge and watching their peers work is that there's no replacement for that. And so, we have a bunch of veterans on this team, not just in that room, but in the entire locker room. That anybody that comes in this organization has no choice but to see that, absorb that, and that's why we put such a high emphasis on the type of guys that we bring in this organization.
How much can Calais Campbell help this kid develop?
I'm sorry, say again.
How much can Calais Campbell help this kid develop?
Well, I mean, again, listen, that's going to be it's going to be on each individual to do that. I mean, but again, Calais, Everett Buddha, it doesn't stop at just James Conner, Mac Wilson, that the entire unit, our defensive unit, our offensive unit, there's plenty of examples. So, our players do a great job of doing what we want them to do. And Walter's going to be no different. Walter's going to come in here and not miss a beat.
Walter told us that one of the concerns he heard from detractors is voices out there saying that he didn't love football. What made you guys feel like this kid loved football?
We turn on the tape and we watch the way he plays.
It seems like you guys had a lot of quality players drop to you at number 16. What separated Walter from maybe some of the other guys you were considering?
Disruption. And, I think, we've talked about it a lot. We wanted to get have a more disruptive defensive unit. We think we've added players that can help us do that. And again, when we find players that can affect the middle of the pocket, it puts a lot of stress on the offense. And so Walter is another guy that we think can do that, can help us do that, and we're really excited to add him to our team.
What do you think about how the first 15 picks fell, especially 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, as you guys were getting closer?
Yeah, honestly, I don't think there was a ton of surprises. We were just talking before we came down here. There really wasn't a ton of out of nowhere picks tonight. I think now they may have went a little bit, maybe a pick or two or different order, but the names really tonight it really wasn't that much surprising who the actual names were.
Coach, how do you feel about your front defensive line across the board?
We'll see in September.
It's a new identity, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, we got guys that, obviously I would say the guys that have been here, obviously they have a role, and they're going to be competing for their roles. Everyone's in that phase right now of the season. We're all competing for our roles, but I think that we got a couple guys that can play different spots. They all have their own skill set, and I feel really good. You know, we added some quality pieces. We got guys coming back who I think have really high ceilings that can help us win, that have shown that they can play winning football for us. And then I'll add Walter into the mix and see where it's going to go.
There's always a balance of, production versus potential. Can you take me through how you weigh and give importance to each of those? Because I keep hearing you guys say you turned on the tape. That to me is significant.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Greg, because we don't always see eye to eye all the time with I see this guy's skill set. I'm not talking about Walt right now. I'm talking about some other guys, but in my mind. But you see the guy's skill set and his anthropometrics, which guys look that word up. I'm huge into that. And he might not produce, you know what I mean? And we've been around guys that produced a lot. They got up here and didn't do anything. We've been around guys that didn't do a lot in college and then took off in the NFL. So it's case-by-case basis, but you're looking for the first thing that I look for is how is this guy going to fit for us, and what are we going to ask him to do, and can he do those things? You know what I mean? And that's what Monti's saying and myself said, Greg. When you turn on the tape, the vision will be pretty specific to what we think he brings to our defense.
How much was the phone ringing for you today?
Pretty quiet. Yeah, pretty quiet. We had some teams check in early on, and then as things kind of went along, it really there really wasn't much tonight, Tyler. And so that's how it goes, and I think that first year, there was a ton of action, and then last year a little bit, and then, tonight, now we'll see what tomorrow brings. But, I think it just, different teams are motivated, and the picks came off and their boards fell a certain way. There just wasn't a lot of motivation for anybody to move up.
Walter's compared himself to Aaron Donald, not asking you guys to do that, but do you appreciate that type of self-belief?
You guys will love meeting him. He's got a quiet confidence about him. That's loud confidence, but I was just talking with Mark. He's different from the guys that we've taken in the first round since we've been here. He's quiet. You got to get to know him. He's a little shy at times. And then, our scouts would be like, you should go to this practice and see what it looks like. And then you turn on a game tape and you see what it looks like, and you're like, wow, you might think one thing of the personality, and it's a little bit different. But like I said, why he fits as a Cardinal, he's got a huge heart. He cares about his teammates, and he wants to maximize himself. And when you show us that from all our different ways that we find that information, sign him up.
What did he show you to know that he had a huge heart?
Just talking to him, you feel it. I'm not going to go into our conversations that I have with players, but he's got a huge heart, Teo. He really does, and he cares about the game. He cares about his teammates, and he's very genuine, and he knows what he needs to work on to get better and hit his ceiling. And I think he's going to do everything that he can to do that.
Where do you feel like he could work to get better at?
Well, I got to get my hands on him first, but I think he can play with his hands a little bit better. We talked about one of those things, he likes to come off the rock and rip roar up the field, which is awesome, one of the things that we love about him. And I think when you pair that, because when he does flash his hands at times, there's not a lot of people that can stay engaged with him. He can throw those guys off, and he has a really good anchor for being this disruptive, quick, athletic, powerful guy. He's not just sitting on a line of scrimmage taking on blocks. He's penetrating, doing those things. But then you do see him anchor when he uses his hands too. So we're going to ask him to do both of those things. So I think just playing with his hat and hands all the time at his pad level, you know what I mean? And when we turned on the tape with him when he came here, I said, what do you got to work on your game? Pad level. All right. I see the same thing. You know what I mean? Here's why, And he gets that. He understands that. So I think you guys always hear me say, I think his best ball's ahead of him.
How much more do your ears perk up when he says the same thing you're thinking?
It's typically a good thing.
He had 32 tackles within 2 yards of the line of scrimmage last year. What does it say about his game? What does that show you?
Yeah, there's I'm not going to go into all the sources here, but there's a lot of our guys on our staff that have been with guys on Ole Miss's staff too. And Monty uses all those as a tool, not the end-all be-all, but a tool. I've worked with a guy that I made a phone call to way back when in the NFL for 3 years. But their scheme, how they used them, was unique, you know, and it pairs up with how we like to use our guys as well, you know, whether it be just playing straight technique or being on the move, what Nick would call stunt mode. And I think he does those things extremely well. But what you see is production. You know, we'd go through a lot of different exercises, I would call it. And Monty has us kind of look at a clump of guys, different guys, you know, and, you know, stack them, rank them, you know what I mean? And I had Walter 1, and he says, why? And I says, because turn on the games, and he makes more plays than anybody. You know, and that sticks out, Greg, to your point about production, you know. And I liked other guys that didn't produce as much. I'm not saying that's, you know, it's a tool we use, but he gets his hat on the ball, and the guy plays with extreme motor, which that tells me he loves football. You know what I mean? When you see a guy that's playing 50 to 60 snaps in a college game, not huddling, on the ball, and he's running down screens and getting out of the stack and trying to dump people and putting his face in the pile, like that jumps out on the tape for a 300-plus pound guy that's playing a ton of snaps. So that was the first thing that jumped off the tape. Man, this guy plays really hard. And so that was all I really needed to see, Josh.
You mentioned how Ole Miss's scheme worked for him. One of the things that jumped out is they kind of dialed him in mostly as a 3 technique.
Yeah.
Do you envision that kind of being?
Yeah, but he plays to, if you look at it, correct. But he does play up and down that line. Like there's in passing situations that got him over the center. He's playing a little bit of 4-eye, a little bit of 5. He can. I think he's going to be able to do all of it. We got to see when he gets here and how he fits into the room. You know what I mean? To make sure that we do the best thing for the defense first. And then the best thing for him as it relates to the other guys too. But I do think he's a multiple position guy, and it's going to be cool to see how he can impact games.
With all the depth you guys have up front now, how will that affect how you integrate him into the rotation? Because you don't have to throw him into the fire.
No, he's going to get thrown into the fire just like all our guys. You know what I mean? But he's no different. I mean, it's just like Marv, D-Rob, Paris, you know, when you guys asked me about Paris, like, you know, he's going to come in here and compete for his role. You know what I mean? That's how we do things, you know. So, and I know he's excited about it.
Monty, we've talked about how one of your favorite parts of the jobs is making that phone call. What was this phone call like?
Walt was ready to roll. Walt's first words out of his mouth were, "Send me that book." So Walt's ready to get into the playbook, and he's ready to get here. And you know, Walt was with his family. He was with his family in Houston, and you could tell the emotion and the excitement. And yeah, it's always great making those calls, and tonight was no different.
Coach, you said you had Walter ranked number 1. I think after he had been drafted, you told Dana that you guys haven't pegged for a very long time. It's not very often where you pick in the middle of a round and your guy is able to follow you without moving up. How rewarding or how exciting is that for that to come to fruition?
Well, I'll let Monty talk about that. Because he obviously knows the board and the league better than I do, right? And every pick, I was kind of, okay. You know, that was kind of today, the perfect world was getting in my car and having Walter Nolen on our team. So
yeah, and Donnie, it's just, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, you set the board and, you know, it's, our board's got all the positions across the top, and then, you know, you stack, and sometimes there's one position, the guy's sticking out and a little higher, and it's really, you sit there and wait, and you peel cards off as their names get read, and then you sit and wait till it's your turn, and hopefully you got one that's standing up there that's high. So, you know, we were excited that Walter made it to us.
What's the formula on that? Because D-line was a position of strength, arguably, with what you've already added and what you drafted last year. Mm-hmm. And you had needs at other spots, but you went with the guy that you consider the best at a position of strength. What's the formula there?
Well, I think, Greg, a couple things there. I mean, I think you can never go wrong taking good players, okay, at whatever position. And then, you know, I think the other thing that we saw, unfortunately, we saw firsthand last year, you know, a month into the season, and we lost 2 or 3 guys on our D-line that we had counting on playing big roles. And so it's a violent position to play, the offensive and defensive line, and, we suffered attrition at both those. So, any time that we can add big bodies and then add talented guys to that room, the competition's going to sort itself out, and the depth, I mean, we can never have enough of those guys.
How much of it factored in that he's still just 21 years old? I mean, it seems like, physically and, play-wise, he has a lot of room to grow and is already a pretty good player.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I think, JG mentioned it. I think we think Walt's a very disruptive player right now, and there's times where, it looks like Walt doesn't even quite know how good he can be. And so, we're excited to develop him. That's our responsibility as an organization for not just Walt, but every player, is to get them in here, develop them, help them reach their peak. And, we do think and Walt has upside ahead of him. And when he does figure out some of those nuances and the pad level and things like that, I think the sky's the limit for Walt.
How do you feel about tomorrow with the 2 picks you have?
Yeah, we're excited. We were actually just we saw the last pick there come across the board at 32. Kansas City, I think, took Simmons, right, the tackle from Ohio State. So we were actually counting numbers. We're at 47, so we're 14 picks out, and we were counting numbers of guys that we like, and so we feel good about where we're at tomorrow. And then we'll see what happens. We'll see if there's phone calls tomorrow or a chance to move up, move back. I mean, those are all possibilities. So, we feel good about it. The way the board looks right now, we think we'll be able to add 2 good players tomorrow.
With the needed defensive tackle and Nolen's age as well, did it also play into your thinking that 2 of your top guys are in their 30s as well at that position?
Yeah, I mean, not really. I mean, I think, we're trying to add good players everywhere, and you can never have enough good players anywhere. And so, what the team looks like right now is different than what the team's going to look like in September. It's different than what the team's going to look like next year, and that's hard to predict. So, we're just happy that we added another talented, violent, disruptive player to a hard to fill position on defensive line.
Gentlemen, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. We'll see you tomorrow. Yep. Thanks, guys.